In 1982, The Thing arrived not as a masterpiece, but as a critical and commercial failure. Over the years, the film has undergone a transformation, slowly emerging to become one of the most celebrated and influential horror films. I am Brandy, otherwise known as Terrorific Lady, and today we will be breaking down The Thing, the story of its creation, its failure, and its resurrection. I want to give a quick shout out to all my supporters. It means the world to be able to teach about and talk about horror movies, especially one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I've done 2 retrospectives so far. One about a slasher that changed the game for all slashers going forward, and another about a little known movie that is a creepy ghost story. This film wasn't well known by a lot of people upon its release either. In fact, a lot of people called it disgusting trash, but I bet you can't think of John Carpenter without thinking of the movie The Thing. So let's dive into this retrospective. And just as a reminder, a retrospective is a breakdown and dissection of a film, talking about all of its parts and whether it still has a place in today's horror world. The year was 1982, and the United States was grappling with a recession. And because of all the bad that was going on in the world, audiences craved escapism and a sense of optimism. They wanted to forget all about the bad crap that was going on. Just 2 weeks before the release of The Thing, Steven Spielberg's E.T. came out, offering people a warm, kind, hopeful, optimistic look at extraterrestrial life. It blew up the box office. And on the very same day that The Thing came out in theaters, Ridley Scott's Blade Runner also came out in theaters. Blade Runner was initially a disappointment as well, but much like John Carpenter's The Thing, went on to become a cult classic. The summer was full of movies coming out one right after another in 1982. Poltergeist, Star Trek II, Conan, and those are just a few of the movies. Universal's marketing for John Carpenter's The Thing was perceived as pretty lackluster and middle of the road, and it failed to cut through the noise of all of those summer films. And the movie was rated R, which in some instances, a movie being rated R is the kiss of death. As an aside note, something I don't really understand because most horror movies are rated R, but it limited its audience compared to the rating of something like Poltergeist. So the timing for the release of The Thing couldn't have possibly been any worse for a movie that Carpenter himself deemed the absolute polar opposite of E.T. The journey to The Thing didn't start directly in 1982. It started 6 years earlier when Stuart Cohn approached Carpenter and wanted to do a more faithful adaptation of the book Who Goes There, the book that was the inspiration for the 1950s horror movie The Thing from Another World. Carpenter was a pretty independent director, and he was not the studio's first choice to direct The Thing. In fact, they went to Tobe Hooper at first because he was hot off the success of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but the concept that he had for The Thing didn't really hit with the studio. There were a lot of other false starts with writers and directors, and then the project was kind of pushed away, tucked in a corner, and forgotten. But when Ridley Scott's movie Alien, which came out in 1979, hit the theaters, it proved that audiences out there had an appetite for sophisticated sci-fi horror. And this is what sparked the studio's interest in finding a writer and director, once again, for The Thing. Carpenter had a few more hits under his belt. He had Halloween, and he also had Escape from New York. And because of those two big hits, he became attached to the project. But John Carpenter was hesitant about taking on the role of director for The Thing because he greatly respected the version The Thing from Another World, though he felt that the monster in that movie was a little less compelling.
And then I subsequently read the short story in high school, and I realized it was a lot different than the movie. What they'd done in the first film was kind of make the James Arness monster more like a Frankenstein creature. And yes, he could. He was a kind of a vegetable that could reproduce various life forms, but he wasn't the imitator, the creature that could imitate any life form from the original story.
He saw the potential to make a version of The Thing that was true to its day, just like The Thing from Another World in the 1950s. So the plot to John Carpenter's The Thing is, like all of his movies, very simple and very straightforward. It thrusts us smack dab into the middle of Outpost 31, which is a research station in Antarctica. They are living their lives, doing their normal things and the research and stuff, but the peace of Outpost 31 is shattered whenever a Norwegian helicopter flies towards Outpost 31, shooting at and chasing a dog. A very seemingly ordinary sled dog. The men of Outpost 31 took the dog in. I guess they felt like they had to, since there was a Norwegian trying to kill it, and the Norwegian went kind of cuckoo and ended up getting shot and killed. But taking in that dog unknowingly would spell their doom and death, because the dog then reveals its true nature. It's not actually a dog at all. It's a shape-shifting, transforming extraterrestrial organism. And not just any extraterrestrial organism, one that can absorb and imitate other life forms. And paranoia spreads throughout the men of Outpost 31 as they feel like they can trust nobody because they don't know who's who. A few big leaders come out of this, mainly R.J. MacReady, who is the helicopter pilot for Outpost 31. And they are trying to survive, but it's a little bit hard when they don't even know what they are trying to survive against. And they're trapped in the most isolated and hostile environment on planet Earth. As Carpenter told Kurt Russell, I'm doing a movie about paranoia. So mistrust and paranoia are the major themes of this movie, and mistrust itself is a villain and a monster. And it's amplified by the fact that they don't know who they're fighting. It's a big question mark and unknown. And plus, they are trapped and isolated miles away from help. Because there are no easy answers, and there's no clear path to safety. And it's because of this that the film's tone is very nihilistic and bleak, with no hope whatsoever of any kind of resolution or happy ending. Casting for The Thing was about finding actors who could be together in a very believable ensemble, only with the tension and paranoia exhibited among them immediately tear that belief apart. John Carpenter turned to Kurt Russell, who he had worked with previously on Elvis and Escape from New York. Russell was involved with the movie early, helping Carpenter shape ideas, but he wasn't officially cast until June of 1981, right as the second unit filming began. The studio, for the role of R.J. MacReady, considered people like Christopher Walken, Jeff Bridges, and Nick Nolte, but they were all unavailable or declined. And Tom Atkins, another Carpenter regular, and Jack Thompson were all very strong competitors, but ultimately the role went to Russell because Carpenter valued his reliability and knew that he would get through the difficult production ahead. Russell committed, and he spent a year growing out MacReady's hair and beard. And his established status already as a well-known actor bumped up his salary from the initial budget of $50,000 to be given per actor. Russell got $400,000 for this film. For the very important and pivotal role of Childs, Carpenter considered several different actors, including Jeffrey Holder, Bernie Casey, and even Isaac Hayes. Ernie Hudson as well, and he was the frontrunner until Carpenter saw Keith David audition. The Thing was his first major film role. He came from the theater, and that taught him to know how to internalize emotions for a character. And he was also guided by veterans such as Richard Masur, who played Clark, and Donald Moffat, who played Gary. In fact, David and Masur decided that their characters, Clark and Childs, just did not like each other at all, which added another layer to the tension. For the biologist Blair, whose descent into madness is very important to the plot, they wanted an everyman that the audience wouldn't suspect. And that is why Wilford Brimley was chosen, because he was not that well known and he fit the bill perfectly. Carpenter wanted to cast Donald Pleasence, but it was ultimately decided that he was too recognizable. David Clennon initially read for the character of Bennings, but he preferred the stoner character of Palmer and his blue-collar vibe, and this is a role that comedians like Jay Leno and Gary Shandling were initially considered for. Richard Masur, who initially read for the character of Gary, asked if he could read for the character of Clark instead because he loved dogs. I love dogs too. Yeah, so we're twinsies. And he bonded extensively with Jed, the wolf dog that played the infected dog, to build that rapport. Thomas Waits became the ultra paranoid character of Windows when in a costume fitting he tried on those distinctive dark glasses. The all-male cast of The Thing presented a unique dynamic. As Kurt Russell observed, without any women working on Outpost 31, there was no one to posture for, which intensified the survival instincts and the slowly building and simmering aggression. And Peter Mahoney, who played Bennings, remembered that the cast was shown the 1951 film, and he was really super excited about being able to film Carpenter's very drastically different and more visceral movie. Production for John Carpenter's The Thing began in August of 1981. Carpenter, once again, collaborated with a cinematographer that he has collaborated with many times before, Dean Cundey. Carpenter insisted on extensive rehearsals, which was a little bit unusual at the time due to how much it cost. Cundey was the one that championed and insisted on the anamorphic widescreen format. He believed that it could showcase the vast isolating landscapes of Antarctica while also giving a sense of claustrophobia within the frame, using the negative space to hint at unseen threats. Extensive storyboards by artists Mike Plug and Mentor Hubner mapped out the film visually with many shots directly mirroring and going off of their detailed panels. Filming began on very meticulously crafted and constructed sets done by John J. Lloyd, the art director, because no existing locations were used. Cundey gave the suggestion of having the ceilings be run through with pipe and that the ceilings be visible to enhance the sense of isolation and confinement. They shot in interior sets built on the Universal lot for some scenes, which were very refrigerated and very cold. Try 28 degrees Fahrenheit cold, which is -2 degrees Celsius, even as temperatures outside soared up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, keep in mind, they were filming in August of 1981. So, very different temperatures between the refrigerated unit and the outside. For the exterior shots of the movie, the production moved north to Stewart, British Columbia, which is near the coast of Alaska, and it was chosen for its remote location and its accessibility. The journey itself was very treacherous because the crew bus, when going up a mountain road, like an unprotected, like very snowy and icy mountain road, the bus almost slid down a 500-foot embankment. No, I hate heights. No, no, no. The exterior set was built during the summer on top of rock that was overlooking a glacier. And it couldn't be heated inside because they had to keep the snow on the roof. If they heated it inside, the snow on the roof would melt. Temperatures went so low that camera lenses would freeze and crack. And the cameras had to constantly be outside because that's where a lot of the shooting was. And if they tried to bring the cameras inside, the lenses would fog over, and that fog would take forever to disappear. Now, filming was dependent on the weather, and very snowy and blizzard days halted production and shooting more often than not. And actors on set often had to react to empty spaces or simple markers. They had to imagine what the character effects would look like in post-production. The burnt down Norwegian camp seen earlier in the film is actually the remains of the burnt down Outpost 31 seen later in the film. And capturing the Outpost 31's destruction required camera assistance positioned inside of the set, which was rigged with explosives, and they had to run as they were filming because the explosives were being detonated remotely. Adding to the challenges on this production, Keith David broke his hand in a car accident a few weeks before he started to film his scenes, so he had to wear a black surgical glove painted to look like his skin tone.
The day before the first day of shooting, I had a car accident, and I broke these two bones, kind of totaled my car. And I didn't go to the hospital right away. My hand swelled up like a boxing glove. You'll notice that at least for the first half of the movie, you never see my left hand. It's always hidden under something, under a table or behind something, or you don't see it.
And when Carpenter reviewed an early assembly cut of the film, he thought that there were just too many scenes of the men standing around talking. So he rewrote whole sections and filmed more outdoor scenes to inject more visual dynamic and to break up the interior environment. He effectively took the cast out into the cold to make the film less boring. At the heart of the Thing's endurance, well over 40 years later, is Rob Bottin's amazing practical effects. He was just in his early 20s and he did the special effects for The Fog, which impressed John Carpenter. For The Thing, Bottin pushed himself and his craft to the absolute limit. Universal Studios initially budgeted only $200,000 for creature effects, but that number quickly proved to not be enough. They saw the scope of Bottin's ambitious designs and the large team that he assembled, so they increased the budget. The budget reached at least $750,000, which was a very hefty sum at the time. He lived on set.
So what I did was I was so wanting this stuff to come out so great, I actually lived at Universal for a year and 5 weeks without taking a day off. I worked, 7 days a week, never took a day off, and I was there night and day. Night and day, I'd sleep on the sets. A Carpenter would come in. Where's Rob? You think, oh, he's in the locker room, or he's in the lab, and then he'd wake me up. Hey, we got to shoot this thing or whatever. And I ended up, working so hard that I ended up in the hospital at the end of the show. John looked at me and he said, "You don't look well." He goes, "Somebody take this guy to the hospital," right?
What he did led to exhaustion, double pneumonia, and a bleeding ulcer, which required hospitalization right after production wrapped. Stan Winston was brought in to do the effects for the dog thing due to Bottin's very large workload.
When it comes to the creature effects on The Thing, we came in actually with Rob's request, because it was an overload period where I think he had some 7 million creature effects going on, and talked to me about possibly picking up one of the effects as some of the overload, which happened to be the dog thing at the beginning of the movie. It was we were just getting heavily into this new element of puppetry and animatronics coming together at my studio. And since I like Rob a lot, and I've also worked with John Carpenter before, and it was a fairly fun and simple situation for us, so jumped into it.
Bottin's creations were unlike anything that anyone had ever seen before. They were gross, nasty, biomechanical horrors that you could not categorize. The chest chomp defibrillator scene, the blood test scene, the spider head scuttling away. These moments are very clearly stuck in the mind of anybody who has ever seen this film, and they showcase Bottin's appalling creativity, as one critic later described it. For the score, Carpenter wanted a European sort of feel. So he recruited Ennio Morricone, who has done music and soundtracks for Dario Argento's Giallo films. To get Morricone to take the project, Carpenter himself flew to Rome, played him the Escape from New York score as a guide for what he wanted him to do, and that's what convinced Morricone to accept the project. Morricone came up with a wide range of options for Carpenter to use for the score for The Thing. Options like orchestral, synthesizer, and even combined scores. Carpenter gravitated towards a stark, minimalist synthesizer piece, which very closely resembled his own musical style, and it became the film's main kind of heartbeat, pulsing theme. Morricone later recalled that Carpenter seemed almost ashamed to show him the movie, and essentially left him to write the music alone. Much of his very intricate score remained unused. It was later released on the soundtrack. So Carpenter, along with composer and frequent collaborator Alan Howarth, secretly recorded additional simple, atmospheric synth cues, almost tones, to fill gaps and enhance tension, blurring the line between music and sound design. Hey there, we'll be getting back into The Thing retrospective here in a moment. But if you're enjoying this retrospective and you want to see more or want to have fun while learning about horror and horror concepts, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. It really does help, and it helps ensure that you won't miss future videos. All right, back to the Antarctic isolation. June 25th, 1982, The Thing was released. But it was released to overwhelming critic negativity, and also overwhelming negativity from audiences. Even its iconic poster, created by artist Drew Struzan, was deemed too B-movie. Critics absolutely destroyed this film. Starlog's Alan Spencer famously called Carpenter a pornographer of violence, and the film instant junk, a cold and sterile exercise attempting to cash in. Vincent Canby of the New York Times dismissed The Thing as wretched excess, finding the effects too phony-looking to be disgusting. David Denby in New York Magazine felt it bordered on obscenity. Roger Ebert found it scary but lacking originality. Beyond the effects, calling the characters underdeveloped stereotypes that were just standing around and waiting to be killed. Linda Gross of the Los Angeles Times called it bereft, disappointing, and nihilistic. Many criticized the dialogue as banal, the pacing as slow, and the relentless gore as overwhelming, sacrificing drama and suspense. Comparisons to Alien and the original 1950s film were very frequent and very unfavorable. Even Christian Nyby, the director of the original film, scoffed, "If you want blood, go to the slaughterhouse." All in all, it's a terrific commercial for J&B Scotch. Kenneth Tobey, the star of the original film, also criticized the explicit special effects. The failure of The Thing was immediate and very personal for Carpenter. He lost the directing job for Firestarter specifically due to The Thing's poor performance at the box office. Universal, despite a multi-film contract brought on by his previous film successes, bought him out of the contract. Carpenter later admitted that this shook his confidence. In a 1985 Starlog interview, he said, "I had no idea it would be received that way. The Thing was just too strong for that time. I didn't take the public's taste into consideration." The bleak anti-authoritarian tone and very graphic nihilism was out of step with the overall mood of 1982. But like a frozen thing in the ice just waiting for the right time to thaw out and assimilate people, The Thing found its audience years after its initial release. Home video, the exploding VHS market, and the film being shown on TV exposed the film to new viewers, allowing what was good about the film to be appreciated without the pressure of big, explosive summer blockbuster expectations. Slowly, very slowly, its reputation improved. Critics and fans started to reevaluate The Thing, recognizing its technical mastery, its atmosphere, and its thematic depth. Peter Nichols wrote in 1992 that this film may yet be seen as a classic. John Kenneth Muir hailed it as Carpenter's most accomplished and underrated directorial effort. Matt Zoller Seitz called it one of the greatest and most elegantly constructed B movies ever made. Empire magazine ranked it among the 500 greatest horror films of all time, and it consistently appears on lists of the greatest horror films, the greatest sci-fi films, and the greatest films in the 1980s. Publications like the Boston Globe and Bloody Disgusting have ranked it near the very top of the horror genre. Its Rotten Tomatoes score now reflects this turnaround. It is now stated certified fresh, which is a big difference from its initial reception. Carpenter himself has acknowledged the film's delayed vindication, calling it perhaps his favorite of his own movies. In an interview, he said, "If The Thing had been a hit, my career would have been different. I wouldn't have had to make the choices that I made, but I needed a job. My career would have been different." While he loved making subsequent films like Christine, Starman, and Big Trouble in Little China, the initial failure of The Thing altered his trajectory in Hollywood. Why did The Thing eventually achieve its now cult classic and iconic status? Its exploration of paranoia still remains relevant. The fear of the enemy within, the breakdown of trust, the uncertainty of identity. These themes resonate deeply, perhaps even more so in our fractured world. Rob Bottin's practical effects still maintain a very realistic, practical, and tangible quality that is often missing today from modern CGI. Dean Koondy's cinematography captures the vastness of Antarctica and the claustrophobic interiors of the Outpost perfectly. And Carpenter's direction is absolutely perfect. He builds suspense through suggestion, shadow, and long, tense takes punctuated by sudden eruptions of violence. The Thing's influence has spread far and wide. Films like Robert Rodriguez's The Faculty pays a direct homage to the blood test scene. Quentin Tarantino is a very vocal admirer of The Thing, channeling The Thing's paranoia and single-location isolation, and even using Kurt Russell in his movie The Hateful Eight. He even used unused Morricone cues from The Thing's original score. Echoes can be shown in shows like The X-Files and Stranger Things, and video games from Resident Evil 4 and Tomb Raider 3 to the massively popular game Among Us, which essentially gamifies The Thing's core premise. Films like Slither and The Mist owe a debt to The Thing's use of body horror. Inspired a 2002 video game, a 2011 prequel, and a remastered version of the 2002 game. It's even become a tradition. The Thing is screened annually for the crew at the actual Amundsen Scott South Pole Station during the Antarctic winter. Filmmakers like Guillermo del Toro, J.J. Abrams, and Edgar Wright cite it as a major influence and a personal favorite. And then there's the ending. Ambiguous, bleak, chef's kiss. MacReady and Childs, the only survivors, sit among the burning ruins of Outpost 31, sharing a bottle of scotch, unsure if the other's human. Was the Thing destroyed? Or is it sitting right there waiting? Carpenter has remained very coy just about it. I mean, he's given answers, but who's to know if the answers are even just the right ones? Maybe he wants you to think it's the right one. Or the right ones. When pressed about who, if anyone, is the Thing in the final act, he's often deflected or simply said that the ambiguity is the point. He told Variety regarding fan theories, "Oh, I know the answer. Oh, I like that," playfully refusing to spoil the mystery. Theories abound, analyzing breath visibility in the cold, the sharing of the bottle of whiskey. People actually think it might be gasoline, but the ending's power lies in its uncertainty. It leaves us just questioning everything, just like the men of Outpost 31 were questioning everything and not trusting each other. Looking at this film's horror DNA and blueprint, paranoia and isolation. Paranoia and isolation. The big, major heartbeat that you have seen in a few of his films before. You've seen the isolation aspect in The Fog. You've seen the paranoia and isolation show in John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness. And you also definitely see paranoia and not even trusting the things around you in John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness. I hear nothing but good things about The Thing. I haven't encountered anybody in the horror community that says that they outright hate it, which is a huge accomplishment for a horror film. From box office failure to cult classic, John Carpenter's The Thing is a testament to filmmaking that was perhaps a little too ahead of its time, too bleak for the era that it came out in. It is a terrifying journey into isolation and paranoia, powered by groundbreaking practical effects and Carpenter's masterful control of tension. It doesn't offer easy answers, and it doesn't offer a happily ever after wrapped up in a nice, neat little package. Instead, it leaves us out in the cold, questioning who we should trust, and has us looking over our shoulder constantly. Decades later, The Thing remains, and I think will continue to remain, an essential masterpiece for the horror genre. Thank you for watching this retrospective on John Carpenter's The Thing, and thank you to all of my supporters, whether you are brand spanking new or whether you have been stuck with me in Outpost 31 for a long time. I greatly appreciate you. I appreciate every like, every comment, every subscription, every show of support. If you haven't seen them already, check out my other John Carpenter retrospectives. I will be tossing them up at the end of the video. Class is dismissed, everybody, for now, but I will see you next time. Bye!